I am Rodin Semple, the ISO lead consultant at ACI Consulting Services. Over the past 5 years or so, we have seen an upsurge in the use of personal protective equipment, known as PPEs. But what are personal protective equipment? Personal protective equipment are basically tools. Equipment, it can be gloves, it can be any apparatus that is provided to help reduce the impact of a hazard to an employee. Examples of items that fall in the category of personal protective equipment can cover helmets, lab coats, harnesses, safety boots, glove, hairnets, etc. When we're going to choose personal protective equipment in an organization for employees, first of all, you need to determine what hazards exist. This is done in what we call a risk assessment. A risk assessment is whereby you examine the different hazards that exist and you identify the controls and what needs to be done. In the risk assessment, it allows you to say whether or not you can tolerate, mitigate that hazard. Personal protective equipment is usually the last defense for combating a hazard. There are other controls you can use. For example, using a less dangerous substance. You can limit the exposure of that person to the particular hazard. You can institute what we call engineering designs, which will prevent the person from being affected by the hazard. So coming back to personal protective equipment, first of all, you need to conduct your risk assessment to determine the type of personal protective equipment. For example, if within your organization, somebody's going to be using caustic soda or corrosive materials, you cannot use a simple latex gloves. You need to use a specialized glove that will help protect that person. So first of all, we establish that you need to conduct your risk assessment. In choosing the personal protective equipment, you need to take into consideration the structure or the body type of that person. You should not give a short person a very long gun. Why? Because it can distract them. Personal protective equipment, once used, need to be inspected before and it needs to be cleaned after. Some organizations have an inventory which tells them how often personal protective equipment are maintained. The responsibility is upon every employee to take care of that personal protective equipment for the period the employer would have specified. Further information on how you can maintain personal protective equipment or how you can choose personal protective equipment depending upon your activity, give us a call on telephone number 501-0110 or send an email at iso@actioninvest.org.